Welcome to My Life in Sport. I'm Phil Bowers, a legal director at O'Connor's, and this podcast will delve into the diverse and fascinating world of the business of sport. For many, sport is more than just a game. It is a powerful industry that shapes careers, drives economies, and transforms lives. In this series, I talk to individuals for whom the business of sport has been central to their professional careers. From the leaders of sports clubs and sports businesses to the regulators who maintain the integrity of the game. Join me as I explore the stories of the people behind the business of sport. I'm joined by podcast royalty today. I have the pleasure of welcoming Nick Britten, who is the co-founder of Global Sports Podcast Network. Global Sports Podcast Network is the world's first network which seeks to publish, I think it's 20 podcasts a day, isn't it, Nick, to a global audience?
It's more than 20, actually. Yeah, we're doing about 24 a day and more are coming online very soon.
Wow, there we go. As I say, podcast royalty. So Nick, thanks for taking the time to join with me today. The first question I'd like to ask you is, one of the themes of this podcast is how sport has shaped people's careers. And I think it's fair to say, Nick, that from day one to your current role, sport has played a big part in your career. It would be helpful for me and also for the listeners to hear from you as to the twists and turns of your career and the different hats you've worn, I suppose, in sports.
Oh, thanks, Phil. Yeah, it has. And it started out right at the very beginning, because when I was at university studying journalism, because that's where my career sort of took me for many, many years. I started out as a sports reporter, and I used to go along on a Saturday afternoon to watch rugby, actually, in Scotland. And those were the days where you had to file your reports by trying to find a payphone and a load of 10p's, because, of course, there were no mobile phones or anything like that. And my dream was always to be a sports reporter. That's what I always wanted to do. As it turned out, my career initially took me in a different direction and took me through news. And I ended up going into news and politics and features interspersed with a bit of sport here and there, dotted around my career. That was my journalism career, which I did for 25 years on the national media. So having left that then gave me a much better opportunity to explore sport in my working life. And that eventually then led to sort of opportunities at my local club, which is Derby County, which started, I guess, back in 2001 in a voluntary way. I started writing a column for the programme, the matchday programme. That lasted 22 years, that column. It was the longest running thing, I think. And that was great. And then I got involved in the community trust, the foundation arm of the business there, which obviously supports the community. And I sat on the board of trustees there. And then I joined in 2019, joined the club in a working capacity on an interim basis as Director of Communications at a time when the football club was signing Wayne Rooney as manager. And they just wanted somebody to support their existing media team, who were very good, but just to add that sort of top level of expertise on comms, because it was going to be a sort of very high profile period for the club in terms of media communications and sort of general interest, and also trying to use those comms to grow the business interests of the club. So that was a very interesting time, because it brought not only the proactive stuff around Wayne Rooney, but also reactive stuff around the fact that the world's media follow his every move. We had incidents going on at the club at the time involving car crashes and drink driving and first team players. And also it was the club at that stage was heading down a bit of a rocky road in terms of its financial position, which eventually led to administration. So it was a very kind of interesting period to be involved with. But I've been doing broadcasting all my life. And eventually, about 2 years ago, that whole media experience, the whole comms experience, the whole journalist experience all came together in one when a colleague and I launched or thought about launching, should I say, the Global Sports Podcast Network, it's a world's first. It's the only one that's ever been done in terms of football. And it is, as you said in your intro, it's daily podcasts based around the English Premier League. So 20 podcasts per day on the English Premier League. Each of the teams has their own podcast, but also a daily podcast on women's football, a daily podcast on a general English Premier League wrap-up, so encompassing everything. One in broadcast in English and one in broadcast in Spanish. So there's lots going on. And we're just about to launch a major soccer league, also Major League MLS, Major League Soccer in America, and also a World Cup podcast is coming online very soon. So that'll be twice a week starting next month, and I'll be hosting that. So there's lots going on, and it's an amazing opportunity.
Wow, wow. So I think, yeah, you do epitome how sport has shaped careers to date. So Nick, you've touched on your previous roles there in broadcast journalism and at Derby, and now obviously through the podcast. Communication is such a crucial part of engagement, whether that's to fans or whether it's to stakeholders. From my perspective, looking in, how does that differ from your role, let's say within Derby, where you would typically, I suppose, like to toe the party line and only divulge so much and not look under the car bonnet in many ways. Whereas now, obviously, the podcast channel seeks to sort of engage fans as much as possible, and they want as much information as possible. So how do those two roles differ from your perspective?
Well, they are worlds apart, and they are worlds apart by necessity, really. As you say, a football club is no different from any business. It likes to divulge what it likes to divulge, and that in sport generally tends to be the very positive side of it. And therefore, the relationship between business, club, and supporters is quite transactional because the club will put out what it wants to put out, and the supporters as consumers just have to accept it, and they don't really, there's no way back. It's not a two-way conversation, if you like, and that's fine, and that's the way it's always been, and that's the way it is in business. And the messaging from football clubs, just as they are in every business, is very carefully chosen, it's very carefully choreographed. It's generally relentlessly positive unless it has to be. You'll never get after a bad performance and the striker has a stinker. You're never going to get the manager in a club interview going, "Oh yeah, the striker had a stinker, didn't he?" That'll never ever happen. That's a job for the external third party journalists, podcasters, etc., etc. So the supporters, from that point of view, have to just sit and take that, and they do quite happily, and it's a very important part of the communications mix. We all want to hear from the manager, we all want to hear from what's going on at the club, but I think as part of that relationship, as supporters, we have to accept that it is a sanitized version of events, and that's okay. The podcasting thing is very, very different, of course, because it is fan-led. All our podcasts are fan-led. They're fan-driven. We want fan engagement. And of course, it's opinion-led. So you can say whatever you like, frankly, within the boundaries of law and societal value. You can say whatever you like. And therefore, it is totally different because the fan is actually right in the middle of that and drives the content rather than anything else. We decided very early on, because we thought about the business model for GSPN very carefully, and we decided very early on that we didn't want to be involved in clubs and we didn't want to have anything official going out, because that immediately puts a straitjacket on you in terms of what you can do in terms of your opinion. So we didn't want to be beholden to anybody in that. We wanted to make it very honest, an open platform where people can express their opinions. So they are naturally a very different type of relationship. One is top down, very much. The club is top down. We decide what we want to put out, why we want to put it out, what exactly the word we're going to use, and that can't be changed. You know, fans can challenge it on social media, they can challenge it in forums, they can challenge it in the pubs, but they can't change it. Whereas podcasting is a very much more open forum where you're subject to check and challenge by your fellow podcasters live on air as much as anything else. So they are very different.
And Nick, you've touched on it there briefly, social media. To me, the relationship that players have with fans has become a lot closer in recent years, and that can be good or that can be bad. Obviously, there's a lot more direct communication with players through social media, which has positive and negative consequences. I was actually watching Jordan Henderson's press conference recently, and he talked about his failed transfer to Monaco from Ajax. And it's fair to say, I think he stood up for himself and said, actually, you've not heard the full story here. The club effectively did try and sell me, and I'm here to give my version of events. And he, in many ways, did not toe the party line. I think he wanted to communicate directly to the press and directly to fans to give his side of events. Do you see that continuing in the future, Nick, that the players in many ways will continue to grow in personalities and want to communicate direct to fans and the media? And how, from someone who's worked within clubs, how dangerous, I suppose, is that for a club?
I think players will absolutely want to do that because it's great for their exposure, which is great for their brand, which brings in more money because they get better sponsors. And it does give them the opportunity to talk directly to supporters. It's not always a good thing. And obviously, on social media, you do get responses and engagements from supporters, which often aren't a good thing. And we've seen the negative side of things, and we've seen players having to come off Twitter because they've been subject to, in the most serious case, abuse. And that's not good, and it can never, ever be tolerated. I think in a world where players can have an honest conversation with supporters, where players can express and express their personality, and we get to know a little bit more of the human being, I don't see that as a bad thing at all. It's a good thing. For far too long, players have been seen as automatons that can't say anything and can't do anything and have to take the party line. Their interviews are quite frankly boring because you know what they're going to say before they say it. So I'm all for it. I think it's great. But there are always scales of balance here. And the balance, as far as the club is concerned, is that these are contracted employees. And again, take it into any other business. Businesses don't allow contracted employees to just go and say what they want about the business without consequence. And the consequence for Jordan Henderson, if he wants to go out on his own personal channels and slag his employer off, well, he's got every right to do it, but there will be consequences, and whatever they might be, and they will be for his employer, Ajax, to do, whether that's cancelling his contract, whether that's sticking him in the reserves and leaving him to rot, all the things that football clubs have the power to do, they've got the power to do it. So it's wrong if you think that players just have all the power in this relationship and can do what they like. But social media has really opened up an avenue that was never open to them before to talk directly to supporters, to sponsors, to generally anybody in their kind of stakeholder world and grow their own brand and grow their own profile from it. I mean, look at right at the top end, your Ronaldos and your Neymars and your Mbappes, these people who have more fame in some, not Ronaldo, but certainly some of them have more fame now for what they do on social media than their performances on the pitch. Because let's face it, Mbappe and Neymar haven't set the world alight on the pitch, and yet their following is enormous because of what they do on social media. So, and that's great for their brand, it's great for their reputation, and it's great for sponsors.
Yeah, and you can just see how sport is continually moving down the business road. It's further increased by players' role on social media. Nick, just bringing it back to your sports podcast, how do you see, obviously, the way we've consumed sport has changed over the years, and it's gone from typically print journalism to more digital journalism, and now it seems to be a lot of video and podcasts. And podcasts over the last couple of years have really been at the sort of the forefront and the centre of communication. How do you think that the way we as fans have consumed sport has changed, and where do you see that going in the future?
If we start at the very beginning, I'm of an age where I can remember the only televised football match per season was the FA Cup final. And it was a massive event. It didn't really matter who played. It was a huge event. And as a child, I could remember being glued to the television and watching the teams come out of the hotel and get on the buses. And there was a kind of mastermind, a special edition of Mastermind, and there was this, and there was that. And it was a whole day's broadcasting within which, the game sat. And it was always really, really, really entertaining excitement. I can't remember when I last watched an FA Cup final now because, quite frankly, I've seen Chelsea 30 times already this season. Do I want to watch them play Manchester United or whoever again? It doesn't hold that allure. So it's changed unbelievably because football particularly, we live and breathe it 24 hours a day because we can live and breathe it 24 hours a day. It is accessible on our mobile phones, on our laptops, on our iPads, on our TVs, every minute of every day. So our relationship and how we consume it has changed massively. I mean, you don't actually now need to go to a game of football to experience a game of football, which sounds crazy. If it's a 3:00 kickoff, you can follow it on fans forums. You can follow it on sometimes on a watch along on YouTube. You've got social media updates going on every few seconds. As soon as a goal is scored, it'll appear on somewhere, on an app somewhere, unofficially or officially, mostly unofficially. And you can feel the game. And then as soon as the game's over, you've got all the reaction at your fingertips, again, official channels or fan channels, and it's just there. So you can become an expert on that game without actually having been to the game, which is truly extraordinary. I don't think it's a bad thing, by the way. I think it's a great thing because it makes football so accessible to people all around the world who want to engage with it. And let's face it, if we're talking about the Premier League, it's the biggest sporting export in the world, and it is growing. Broadcasters all over the planet are lining up to show televised football 24 hours a day, live games. The appetite is insatiable. It is insatiable. And you would think it would get to saturation point, but it hasn't got there yet. And there's no sign of it slowing down. So we as consumers, and if you add that to the kind of advent of digital media, particularly, which allows us to watch everything on our phone, really, we just need to, if you don't want to go to a game, just be on your phone and you can see everything.
Yeah. And then I suppose on the flip side of that, actually, when you do go to a game, I've been to a couple of Liverpool games this season, and you appreciate it a lot more in many ways because you're there in person and you're sort of away from the digital side of things. So again, it's that balance. In terms of the podcast, you've talked about how sort of the appetite for football is continually growing and it's going to increase in the future. How do you, as a business owner, seek to sort of navigate the pitfalls of ownership of data rights and the moderation of content? Obviously, you've got a lawyer on this call, so no judgment here from my perspective. Yeah. So how do you navigate that?
I have to be careful. So one of the things that we wanted to do with GSPN is to exploit that insatiable demand that I was just referring to. So we go out 5 days a week. There's very heavy structure in terms of all our podcasts. So Monday will be a wash up of the game. Tuesday will be a kind of deep dive into tactics. Wednesday is a bit of a wild card where people can do what they like. Thursday is always one of the most popular podcasts because it's a crossover day. So if Palace are playing Wolves, the two podcasting teams from Palace and Wolves get together and fight it out online, for example. And Friday's a deep dive preview into the weekend's games. Now, within that, obviously, it's good to be able to refer to stuff. It's good to be able to use content that's out there. It's good to be able to drop in bits and bobs of broadcasted material that's already in the public domain. But you have to be unbelievably careful about what you do. So we are governed broadly by law, obviously. So there are defamation laws in this country and globally around what you can and can't say about players and individuals and things like that. And there's also, the regulatory environment of copyrighted material, and you've got to be very careful about what you can use there. So, for example, you're okay to use content from a public press conference, but you're not necessarily able to use content from a club-owned video. So if the chief executive does an interview on the club's channel, for example, and puts that out, you can't just use that without going to them and asking for explicit permission to use it. And bizarrely, the social media sites are really hot on this. So we've sort of fallen foul, I don't mind admitting this, of TikTok and YouTube, not intentionally and not because we've actually used any material, but we referred to stuff and it seems to have been picked up by the algorithms and deemed it to be against a copyright law, which actually it isn't. It isn't against copyright law at all. But the algorithms have picked it up and suggested it is, which does make me laugh on social media channels, particularly TikTok, where you can, there's been so much in the media recently, hasn't there, about where you can find out where to buy knives and you can find out where to do self-harm and horrendous things like that, awful things like that, which have had a deep societal impact. And yet when somebody wants to talk about a game of football on a Saturday afternoon, it's all over you and it picks you up like that. It's crazy. The algorithms are all wrong and that needs to change. It needs to change very, very soon. And social media companies need to get on top of this. As responsible broadcasters, which is what we are, we're aware of our regulatory responsibilities and aware of our legal responsibilities and we'll obviously abide by them at all times. But it is something you have to be very aware of.
Yeah, it opens up a wider question, which is probably not for this podcast, in terms of how social media companies do need to take responsibility and potentially be regulated because they have so much exposure now and direct influence over the general public. So it's one to watch.
They do, and they have far too much power.
Yeah,
they have far too much power because politicians, quite frankly, are too frightened to. I mean, look what's going on in America. Look who's at the inauguration of Donald Trump. It was all the owners and leaders of the big tech social media companies. And they are almost an impossible beast to take on because we've allowed globally they've allowed them to put themselves in the situation they're in. And now they're such a big beast. It's almost far too late. And any respective action is going to be, I think, nigh on impossible. It is going to be nigh on impossible. But we live in hope.
We do. And yeah, I mean, that could be your next career, Nick. It could be a venture into politics away from sport. We'll see.
Well, I'm always happy to give that a go. I'm always happy to give that a go.
So, Nick, just bringing the questions to a close, what's been the sort of the lasting impact of sport on your life and your career and the legacy aspect? Is there anything that is personal to you and means a lot to you, and how sport has actually shaped your career and your life?
Well, it's played a huge part on so many ways. There is the work bit, I guess, which is incredibly important. And I'm fascinated. I'm a big football fan, but I'm fascinated by the business of football as much as what goes on the pitch, because that to me is really, really interesting. The job that goes on the pitch is down to to football managers and football players. And whilst I would classify myself as a football manager, that begins and ends with Sunday morning on the side of the pitch, I'm afraid. Maybe there's a second career there, who knows? But the business of football absolutely fascinates me. But actually, it's the real grassroots stuff, which I think sport can play an incredibly powerful role in. It can be incredibly powerful. Now, I've been involved in grassroots sports for 15, 20 odd years, and just at a really local level. So my local club, which is Little Overdazzlers in Derby, I've been chairman there, or I was chairman there for 7 or 8 years. I coached there sort of 15 years, and I've seen the power and the effect that sport can have on young people, because it's a youth club, and it is unbelievable. It is unbelievable. So you've got the physical benefits of going out and running around a football pitch and playing football. But to me, it's about learning the life skills and teaching kids from a young age how to win properly, how to lose properly, how to be gracious, how to control your temper. All of those things are really, really important skills to have, to take into your working life and to take into your adult social life. And you can teach those on a football pitch at a very, very early age, right through to the real benefits of to your mental health, of playing sport. And this isn't just football, it's any sport, of that social side of it, of that camaraderie, of that enjoyment, of all the hormones being released in your body that affect your brain. And it's an incredibly powerful thing that sport, and as I say, I live in a world of football, but any sport can do. And from a coaching perspective, as frustrating as it is, and every grassroots coach out there who listens to this will know exactly what I'm talking about, it is the most frustrating thing in the world. But it's also the best thing in the world, because when you see players and kids particularly run around with smiles on their faces, enjoying football, and you see the benefit that you can bring to them once or twice a week, and then even in their lives, and some of them have difficult lives, this football is a release. It is an amazing thing, and it's a great thing. And that to me has almost been the best thing about it. Yeah, job's brilliant, work's brilliant. I love the podcasting business. It's brilliant fun. It's great. But the power of sport and the effect it can have on young people, I think, has been the most beneficial thing that I've seen in that whole kind of sporting arena that I've been involved with, since I was a kid myself.
Yeah, really interesting, Nick. And yeah, and that's a fitting place to end the podcast. And the power of sport is unbelievable. And seeing your career in sport and how much that's meant for your career and sort of your personal life away from it is really interesting, Nick. So thank you. And thanks for your time today. And I'm sure everyone will appreciate the information you've shared. So thanks, Nick. And
thank you very much.
Sure
it's been lovely to chat to you.
Good. I'm sure our podcast paths will probably meet again at some point in the future.
I hope so.
Okay. Thanks, Nick. Bye.
Thanks for listening. My Life in Sport is brought to you by O'Connors, the law firm for sport. Find out more at o'connors.law.